It is also about how we govern, because we are one America.
I'm talking about changing Washington.
To restore the principles of integrity.
Let's show them what we've got. Let's show them what humanity can do.
The MSNBC Washington Post Democratic Presidential Debate. Live from Atlanta, Georgia, and the Tyler Perry Studios. Here is Rachel Maddow.
Hello and welcome to the MSNBC Washington Post Democratic Candidate Debate. At least some of us are very, very happy to be here tonight. I'm Rachel Maddow, here in Atlanta, Georgia tonight with my fellow moderators. Andrea Mitchell is NBC News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent and the host of Andrea Mitchell Reports on MSNBC. Ashley Parker is White House reporter for The Washington Post, and Kristen Welker is NBC News White House correspondent.
We'll be covering a wide range of topics tonight, including national security, race, and climate. Each candidate will have 1 minute and 15 seconds to answer our questions and 45 seconds if we need to follow up. And we ask the audience to respect the candidates and please don't interrupt.
There's 10 candidates here tonight. No time to waste. Let's get right to it. We're in the middle of the fourth presidential impeachment proceedings in our nation's history. Ambassador Gordon Sondland delivered testimony today in the House impeachment inquiry that buttressed the case that President Trump withheld military aid to Ukraine and a White House meeting with President Zelensky because he wanted the Ukrainian president to announce investigations that would benefit President Trump politically. Senator Warren, you have said already that you've seen enough to convict the president and remove him from office. You and 4 of your colleagues on this stage tonight, who are also U.S. senators, may soon have to take that vote. Will you try to convince your Republican colleagues in the Senate to vote the same way? And if so, how?
Of course I will. And the obvious answer is to say, first, read the Mueller report, all 442 pages of it that showed how the president tried to obstruct justice. And when Congress failed to act at that moment, it meant the president felt free to break the law again and again and again. And that's what's happened with Ukraine. We have to establish the principle, no one is above the law. We have a constitutional responsibility and we need to meet it. But I want to add one more part based on today's testimony. And that is, how did Ambassador Sondland get there? You know, this is not a man who had any qualifications except one. He wrote a check for $1 million. And that tells us about what's happening in Washington. The corruption, how money buys its way into Washington. You know, I raised this months ago about the whole notion that donors think they're going to get ambassadorships on the other side. And I've taken a pledge. Anyone who wants to give me a big donation, don't ask to be an ambassador, because I'm not going to have that happen. I asked everyone who's running for president to join me in that, and not a single person has so far. I hope what we saw today during the testimony means lots of people will sign on and say we are not going to give away the ambassador posts to the highest bidder.
Senator Warren, thank you. Senator Klobuchar, you've said that you support the impeachment inquiry, but you want to wait for a Senate trial to hear the evidence and make a decision about convicting the president. After the bombshell testimony of Ambassador Sondland today, has that view changed for you?
I have made it very clear that this is impeachable conduct, and I've called for an impeachment proceeding. I just believe our job as jurors is to look at each count and make a decision. But let me make very clear that what this impeachment proceeding about is really our democracy at stake. This is a president that not only with regard to his conduct with Ukraine, but every step of the way puts his own private interests, his own partisan interests, his own political interests in front of our country's interest. And this is wrong. This is a pattern with this man, and it goes to everything from how he has betrayed our farmers and our workers to what he has done with foreign affairs, leaving the Kurds for slaughter, sucking up to Vladimir Putin every minute of the day. That is what this guy does. And I think it is very, very important that we have a president that's going to put our country first. I was thinking about this when I was at the Carter Presidential Museum, and on the wall are etched the words of Walter Mondale when he looked back at their 4 years, not perfect, and he said this: "We told the truth, we obeyed the law, we kept the peace." We told the truth, we obeyed the law, we kept the peace. That is the minimum that we should expect in a president of the United States.
Senator, thank you. Senator Sanders, I'd like to go to you. Americans are watching these impeachment hearings. At the same time, they're also focused on their more immediate daily economic and family concerns. How central should the president's conduct uncovered by this impeachment inquiry be to any Democratic nominee's campaign for president? How central would it be to yours?
Well, Rachel, sadly, we have a president who is not only a pathological liar, he is likely the most corrupt president in the modern history of America. But we cannot simply be consumed by Donald Trump. Because if we are, you know what? We're going to lose the election. Right now, you got 87 million people who have no health insurance or are underinsured. We're facing the great existential crisis of our time in terms of climate change. You got 500,000 people sleeping out on the street, and you got 18 million people paying half of their limited incomes for housing. What the American people understand is that the Congress can walk and chew bubble gum at the same time. In other words, we can deal with Trump's corruption, but we also have to stand up for the working families of this country. We also have to stand up to the fact that our political system is corrupt, dominated by a handful of billionaires, and that our economy is rigged with 3 people owning more wealth than the bottom half of America. We can do it all when we rally the American people in the cause of justice.
Mayor Buttigieg, let me put the same question to you. How central should the president's conduct uncovered by the impeachment inquiry be to a Democratic nominee's campaign? How central would it be to yours?
Well, the constitutional process of impeachment should be beyond politics, and it is not a part of the campaign. But the president's conduct is. The impeachable conduct that we have seen in the abuse of power that we're learning more about in the investigations, but just to be clear, the president's already confessed to it on television. But that's just part of what we've seen. Under normal circumstances, a president would leave office after something that was revealed recently that barely got any attention at all, which was the president had to confess in writing, in court, to illegally diverting charitable contributions that were supposed to go to veterans. We are absolutely going to confront this president for his wrongdoing, but we are also each running to be the president who will lead this country after the Trump presidency comes to an end, one way or the other. I'm running to be the president for that day the sun comes up and the Trump presidency is behind us, which will be a tender moment in the life of this country. And we are going to have to unify a nation that will be as divided as ever, and while doing it, address big issues that didn't take a vacation for the impeachment process or for the Trump presidency as a whole. A climate approaching the point of no return. The fact that we've still got to act on health care. Kids learning active shooter drills before they learn to read. And an economy where even when the Dow Jones is looking good, far too many Americans have to fight like hell just to hold on to what they've got.
Mr. Mayor.
Those are the crises that will be awaiting the next president and will be at the heart of our campaign.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Andrew.
Vice President Biden, you've suggested in your campaign that if you defeat President Trump, Republicans will start working with Democrats again. But right now, Republicans in Congress, including some of whom you've worked with for decades, are demanding investigations not only of you, but also of your son. How would you get those same Republicans to work with you?
Well, look, the next president of the United States is going to have to do 2 things. Defeat Donald Trump, that's number 1. And number 2, it's going to have to be able to go into states like Georgia and North Carolina and other places and get a Senate majority. That's what I'll do. You have to ask yourself up here, who is most likely to be able to win the nomination in the first place, to win the presidency in the first place? And secondly, who is most likely to increase the number of people who are Democrats in the House and in the Senate? And by the way, I learned something about these impeachment trials. I learned, number 1, that Donald Trump doesn't want me to be the nominee. That's pretty clear. He held up aid to make sure that, while at the same time innocent people in the Donbass are getting killed by Russian soldiers. Secondly, I found out that Vladimir Putin doesn't want me to be president. So I've learned a lot about these things early on from these hearings that are being held. But the bottom line is, I think we have to ask ourselves the honest question: who is most likely to do what needs to be done? Produce a Democratic majority in the United States Senate, maintain the House, and beat Trump.
Senator Harris, your thoughts about that?
Well, first of all, we have a criminal living in the White House. And there is no question that in 2020, the biggest issue before us until we get to that tender moment is justice is on the ballot. And what we saw today is Ambassador Sondland, by his own words, told us that everyone was in the loop. That means it is a criminal enterprise engaged in by the president, from what we heard today, the vice president, the secretary of state, and the chief of staff. And so this not only points to the corrupt nature of this administration and the need for these impeachment proceedings to go forward, but it also points to another issue. And back to the question that you asked earlier, which is, what does this mean for the American people? Because what it means when I watch this is that there are clearly two different set of rules for two different groups of people in America. The powerful people who with their arrogance think they can get away with this, and then everybody else. Because here's the thing. For those working people who are working 2 and 3 jobs, if they don't pay that credit card by the end of the month, they get a penalty. For the people who don't pay their rent, they get evicted. For the people who shoplift, they go to jail. We need the same set of rules for everybody, and part of the reason I'm running for president is to say that we have to bring justice back to America for all people, and not just for some.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Warren, you have cast yourself as a fighter. If you were elected, though, you would be walking into an existing fight, a country that is already very divided over the Trump presidency, among other things. Do you see that divide as permanent, or do you need to bring the country together if you become president to achieve your goals?
So I think the way we achieve our goals and bring our country together is we talk about the things that unite us. And that is that we want to build an America that works for the people, not one that just works for rich folks. You know, I have proposed a 2-cent wealth tax. That is a tax for everybody who has more than $50 billion in assets. Your first $50 billion is free and clear. But your $50 billionth and first dollar, you got to pitch in 2 cents. And when you hit $1 billion, you got to pitch in a few pennies more. Here's the thing. Doing a wealth tax is not about punishing anyone. It's about saying you built something great in this country, good for you. But you did it using workers all of us help pay to educate. You did it using getting your goods on roads and bridges all of us help pay for it. You did it protected by police and firefighters all of us help pay the salaries for. So when you make it big, when you make it really big, when you make it top 0.1% big, pitch in 2 cents so everybody else gets a chance to make it. And here's the thing. That's something that Democrats care about, independents care about, and Republicans care about. Because regardless of party affiliation, people understand across this country, our government is working better and better for the billionaires, for the rich, for the well-connected, and worse for everyone else. We come together when we acknowledge that and say we're going to make real change.
Thank you. Senator Booker, do you agree with that strategy?
Well, first of all, I think we all agree that we need to bring in a lot more revenue in this country. We actually have a real problem with the tax rates, tax loopholes, tax cheats. And I don't agree with the wealth tax the way that Elizabeth Warren puts it. But I agree that we need to raise the estate tax. We need to tax capital gains as ordinary income, real strategies that will increase revenue. But here's the challenge. We as Democrats need to fight for a just taxation system. But as I travel around the country, we Democrats also have to talk about how to grow wealth as well. When I stood in church recently and asked folks in a black church, how many people here want to be entrepreneurs, half the church raised their hands. If we as a country don't start, if we have a party don't start talking not just about how to tax wealth, but to give more people opportunities to create wealth, to grow businesses, to have their American dream. Because yeah, we need to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, $15 an hour. But the people in communities I frequent, their aspiration for their lives is not just to have those fair wages. They want to have an economy that provides not just equalities in wealth, but they want to have equalities of opportunity. And that's what our party has to be about as well.
Senator Warren, you wanted to respond?
Sure. So let me just tell you what we can do with that 2-cent wealth tax. 2 cents on the top 1/10 of 1% in this country, and we can provide universal child care for every baby in this country ages 0 to 5. That is transformative. We can provide universal pre-K for every 3-year-old and 4-year-old in America. We can stop exploiting the women, largely black and brown women, who do this work, and we can raise the wages of every child care worker and preschool teacher in universities, and we can cancel student loan debt for 95% of the folks who've got it. 2-cent wealth tax, and we can invest in an entire generation.
Taxation where millionaires and billionaires pay their fair share, but dear God, we're going to have pathways to prosperity for more Americans. We're going to see a change in what we see right now. Small businesses, new startups are going down in this country.
Thank you,
We need
Senator.
to give
Senator
more
Warren,
new entrepreneurs
Senator Warren,
access
briefly,
to wealth.
just your last thoughts on this.
The idea behind what is fair. Today, the 99% in America are on track to pay about 7.2% of their total wealth in taxes.
I'm not disagreeing with that.
The top 1/10 of 1% that I want to say pay 2 cents more, they'll pay 3.2% in America. I'm tired of freeloading billionaires. I think it's time that we ask those at the very top to pay more so that every single one of our children gets a real
everybody is tired of freeloading billionaires. Everybody's tired of corporations getting away with paying zero taxes. We're not disagreeing with that.
Thank you very much, Senator Warren. Thank you. Mayor Buttigieg, you have said, quote, "I will never allow us to get so wrapped up in the fighting that we start to think fighting is the point." The Republican Party never stopped fighting President Obama in his 8 years in office. So what would you do that President Obama didn't do to change that?
Well, as President Obama commented recently, we are now in a different reality than we were even 12 years ago. And to me, the extraordinary potential of the moment we're in right now is that there is an American majority that stands ready to tackle big issues that didn't exist in the same way even a few years ago. Even on issues where Democrats have been on defense, like immigration and guns, we have a majority to do the right thing if we can galvanize, not polarize that majority. For example, on health care. The reason I insist on Medicare for all who want it as the strategy to deliver on that goal we share of universal health care is that that is something that, as a governing strategy, we can unify the American people around. Creating a version of Medicare, making it available to anybody who wants it, but without the divisive step of ordering people onto it, whether they want to or not. And I believe that commanding people to accept that option, whether we wait 3 years, as Senator Warren has proposed, or whether you do it right out of the gate, is not the right approach to unify the American people around a very, very big transformation that we now have an opportunity to deliver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kristen Welker.
Let's talk about Medicare for All. Senator Warren, you are running on Medicare for All. Democrats have been winning elections even in red states with a very different message on health care, protecting Obamacare. Democrats are divided on this issue. What do you say to voters who are worried that your position on Medicare for All could cost you critical votes in the general election?
So I look out and I see tens of millions of Americans who are struggling to pay their medical bills. 37 million people who decided not to have a prescription filled because they just can't afford it. People who didn't take the tests the doctor recommended because they just can't afford it. So here is my plan. Let's bring as many people in and get as much help to the American people as we can, as fast as we can. On day one, as president, I will bring down the cost of prescription drugs on things like insulin and EpiPens. That's going to save tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars for people. I'm going to defend the Affordable Care Act from the sabotage of the Trump administration. And in the first 100 days, I'm going to bring in 135 million people into Medicare for All at no cost to them. Everybody under the age of 18, everybody who has a family of 4, income less than $50,000. I'm going to lower the age of Medicare to 50 and expand Medicare coverage to include vision and dental and long-term care. And then in the third year, when people have had a chance to feel it and taste it and live with it, we're going to vote and we're going to want Medicare for all.
Senator, thank you, Senator. Senator Sanders, let me bring you into this conversation and ask you the question. I want to ask you the question question this way, Senator Sanders. You described your campaign, including your plans for Medicare for All, as a political revolution.
Yes.
President Obama explicitly said the country is, quote, less revolutionary than it is interested in improvement. The average American doesn't think we have to completely tear down the system and remake it, end quote. Is President Obama wrong?
No, he's right. We don't have to tear down the system. But we do have to do what the American people want. And the American people understand today that the current healthcare system is not only cruel, it is dysfunctional. Now, you tell me how we have a system in which we spend twice as much as do the people of any other country, and yet we got 87 million uninsured, underinsured. In some cases, we pay 10 times more for prescription drugs as do the people of Canada or other countries. 500,000 people go bankrupt because of medically related issues. They come down with cancer, and that's a reason to go bankrupt. Now, some of the people up here think that we should not take on the insurance industry. We should not take on the pharmaceutical industry. But you know what? If you think back to FDR, and if you think back to JFK and Harry Truman and Barack Obama, as a matter of fact, people have been talking about health care for all. Well, you know what? I think now is the time. And in the first week of my administration, we will introduce Medicare for all. Medicare for all. That means no deductibles, no co-payments, no out-of-pocket expenses.
Senator,
that's where we got to go.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Vice President Biden.
You know, we can do this without charging people raising $30, $40 trillion. The fact is that right now, the vast majority of Democrats do not support Medicare for all. It couldn't pass the United States Senate right now with Democrats. It couldn't pass the House. Nancy Pelosi is one of those people who then thinks it makes sense. We should build on Obamacare, provide the plan I put forward before anybody in here, adding a Medicare option in that plan, and not make people choose. Allow people to choose, I should say. But if you go the route of my two friends on my right and my left, you have to give up your private insurance. 160 million people like their private insurance. And if they don't like it, they can buy into a Medicare-like proposal in my plan. Drug prices go down, premiums go down across the board. But here's the deal. They get to choose. I trust the American people to make a judgment what they believe is in their interest and not demand of them what the insurance companies. They want no competition, and my friends say you have to only go Medicare for all.
Vice President Biden, thank you. Ashley.
Congresswoman Gabbard, you have criticized Hillary Clinton as the, quote, personification of the rot that has sickened the Democratic Party. What is the rot you see in the Democratic Party?
That our Democratic Party, unfortunately, is not the party that is of, by, and for the people. It is a party that has been and continues to be influenced by the foreign policy establishment in Washington, represented by Hillary Clinton and others' foreign policy, by the military-industrial complex and other greedy corporate interests. I'm running for president to be the Democratic nominee that rebuilds our Democratic Party, takes it out of their hands, and truly puts it in the hands of the people of this country, a party that actually hears the voices of Americans who are struggling all across this country, and puts it in the hands of veterans and fellow Americans who are calling for an end to this ongoing Bush-Clinton-Trump foreign policy doctrine of regime change wars, overthrowing dictators in other countries, needlessly sending my brothers and sisters in uniform into harm's way to fight in wars that actually undermine our national security and have cost us thousands of American lives. These are wars that have cost us as American taxpayers trillions of dollars since 9/11 alone, dollars that have come out of our pockets, out of our hospitals, out of our schools, out of our infrastructure needs. As president, I will end this foreign policy, end these regime change wars, work to end this new Cold War and arms race, and instead invest our hard-earned taxpayer dollars actually into serving the needs of the American people.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Right here at home.
Senator Harris, any response?
Oh, sure. I think that it's unfortunate that we have someone on the stage who is attempting to be the Democratic nominee for President of the United States, who during the Obama administration spent 4 years full-time on Fox News criticizing President Obama.
That's
who
ridiculous,
has spent full-time,
That's ridiculous.
who has spent full-time criticizing people on this stage as affiliated with the Democratic Party. When Donald Trump was elected, not even sworn in, buddied up to Steve Bannon to get a meeting with Donald Trump in the Trump Tower, fails to call a war criminal by what he is as a war criminal, and then spends full time during the course of this campaign, again, criticizing the Democratic Party. What we need on the stage in November is someone who has the ability to win. And by that, we need someone on that stage who has the ability to go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump, and someone who has the ability to rebuild the Obama coalition and bring the party and the nation together. I believe I am that candidate.
Thank you, Senator.
Yes.
Congresswoman Gabbard, I'll give you a chance to respond.
What Senator Harris is doing is unfortunately continuing to traffic in lies and smears and innuendos because she cannot challenge the substance of the argument that I'm making, the leadership and the change that I'm seeking to bring in our foreign policy, which only makes me guess that she will, as president, continue the status quo, continue the Bush-Clinton-Trump foreign policy of regime change wars, which is deeply destructive. This is personal to me because I served in Iraq. I left my seat in the state legislature in Hawaii, volunteered to deploy to Iraq, where I served in a medical unit where every single day I saw the terribly high human cost of war. I take very seriously the responsibility that the president has to serve as commander-in-chief, to lead our armed forces, and to make sure always, no, I'm not going to put party interests first. I will put the interests of the American people above all else.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I want to briefly give Senator Harris a final second to respond.
I believe that what our nation needs right now is a nominee who can speak to all people. I spent my entire career standing mostly in a courtroom speaking 5 words, Kamala Harris for the people. And it was about all the people, regardless of their race, regardless of their gender, regardless of where they live geographically, regardless of the party with which they're registered to vote or the language their grandmother speaks. We need someone on this debate stage in November who has the ability to unify the country and to win the election. And I believe, again, I am that candidate.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Mr. Steyer, you have denounced the special interests that pour hundreds of millions of dollars into the political process to influence it. But in fact, you have spent over $300 million of your own money in support of your political goals. How do you respond to critics who see you as the embodiment of a special interest?
What I've done over the last decade is to put together coalitions of ordinary American citizens to take on unchecked corporate power. We have a broken government in Washington, D.C. It's been purchased by corporations. Over the last decade, with the help of the American people, we have taken on and beaten the oil companies. We have taken on and beaten the tobacco companies. We have taken on and beaten utilities. We've taken on and beaten the drug companies. I've also built one of the largest grassroots organizations in the United States. Last year, Next Gen America did the largest youth voter mobilization in American history. I also, in partnership with 7 national unions, knocked on 15 million doors in 2016 and 10 million in 2018. What I've done is to try to push power down to the American people, to take power away from the corporations who've bought our government. And I'm talking now about structural reform in Washington, D.C. Term limits. If you want bold change in the United States, you're going to have new and different people in charge. I'm the only person on this stage who will talk about term limits. Vice President Biden won't, Senator Sanders won't, even Mayor Pete Buttigieg will not talk about term limits and structural change. I would let the American people pass laws themselves through direct democracy. It's time to push the power back to the people and away from D.C.
Mr. Steyer, thank you. Senator Klobuchar, a brief response.
Well, I'm someone that doesn't come from money, and I appreciate the work of Mr. Steyer. But right now we have a system that's not fair, and it's not just fair for money. And so what I would do is start a constitutional amendment and pass it to overturn Citizens United. That's what we should do so that we stop this dark money and outside money from coming into our politics. I have led the way on voting, and I can tell you right now, one solution that would make a huge difference in this state would be allow every kid in the country to register to vote when they turn 18. If we had a system like this, and we did something about gerrymandering, and we stopped the voting purges, and we did something significant about making sure we don't have money in politics from the outside, Stacey Abrams would be governor of this state right now.
Thank you,
that's
Senator.
what should have happened. So while I appreciate his work, I am someone that doesn't come from money. I see my husband out there. My first Senate race, I literally called everyone I knew, and I set what is still an all-time Senate record. I raised $17,000 from ex-boyfriends. And I'd like to point out, it is not an expanding base. So I don't just think this with my head. I feel it in my heart.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. Mr. Yang, I want to bring you in. Mr. Yang. Mr. Yang, you've made a virtue of your outsider status. You've never served in the military or in government. What has prepared you to respond to a terrorist attack or a major disaster?
Well, first, I just want to stick up for Tom. We have a broken campaign finance system, but Tom's been spending his own money fighting climate change. And you can't knock someone for having money and spending it in the right way, in my opinion.
Thanks, Andrew.
No problem. As Commander-in-Chief, I think we need to be focused on the real threats of the 21st century. And what are those threats? Climate change, artificial intelligence, loose nuclear material, military drones, and non-state actors. And if you look up, we're in the process of potentially losing the AI arms race to China right now because they have more access to more data than we do, and their government is putting billions of dollars to work subsidizing the development of AI in a way that we are not. We are 24 years behind on technology. And I can say that with authority because we got rid of the Office of Technology Assessment in 1995. Think about that timing. I guess they thought they'd invented everything. The next Commander-in-Chief has to be focused on the true threats of tomorrow, and that's what I will bring to the table as Commander-in-Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Yang. Andrea?
Mayor Buttigieg, let's talk about your record as a candidate. You were elected mayor in a Democratic city, receiving just under 11,000 votes. And in your only statewide race, you lost by 25 points. Why should Democrats take the risk of betting on you?
Because I have the right experience to take on Donald Trump. I get that it's not traditional establishment Washington experience, but I would argue we need something very different right now. In order to defeat this president, we need somebody who can go toe-to-toe, who actually comes from the kinds of communities that he's been appealing to. I don't talk a big game about helping the working class while helicoptering between golf courses with my name on them. I don't even golf. As a matter of fact, I never thought I'd be on a Forbes magazine list, but they did one of all the candidates by wealth, and I am literally the least wealthy person on this stage. I also wore the uniform of this country and know what is at stake in the decisions that are made in the Oval Office in the Situation Room. And I know how to bring people together to get things done. I know that from the perspective of Washington, what goes on in my city might look small, but frankly, where we live, the infighting on Capitol Hill is what looks small. The usual way of doing business in Washington is what looks small. And I believe we need to send somebody in who has a different kind of experience. The experience on the ground, solving problems, working side by side with neighbors on some of the toughest issues that come up in government, recognizing what is required of executive leadership and bringing that to Washington so that Washington can start looking a little more like our best-run communities in the heartland before the other way around starts to happen.
Thank you, Mayor. Senator Klobuchar, you said this of Mayor Buttigieg, quote, "Of the women on the stage, do I think that we would be standing on that stage if we had the experience he had? No, I don't. Maybe we're held to a different standard." Senator, what did you mean by that?
First of all, I've made very clear I think that Pete is qualified to be up on this stage, and I am honored to be standing next to him. But what I said was true. Women are held to a higher standard. Otherwise, we could play a game called Name Your Favorite Woman President, which we can't do because it has all been men, including all vice presidents being men. And I think any working woman out there, any woman that's at home, knows exactly what I mean. We have to work harder, and that's a fact. But I want to dispel one thing, because for so long, why has this been happening? I don't think you have to be the tallest person on this stage to be president. I don't think you have to be the skinniest person. I don't think you have the loudest voice on the stage. I don't think that means that you will be the one that should be president. I think what matters is if you're smart, if you're competent, and if you get things done. I am the one that has passed over 100 bills as the lead Democrat in that gridlock of Washington in Congress on this stage. I think you've got to win. And I am the one, Mr. Vice President, that has been able to win every red and purple congressional district as the lead on a ticket every time. I govern both with my head and my heart. And if you think a woman can't beat Donald Trump, Nancy Pelosi does it every single day.
Mr. Vice President, just a quick response.
I think a woman's qualified to be president. There's no reason why, if you think the woman's the most qualified person now, you should vote for them. The reason why I think I should be president and be the nominee is, number one, I have brought people together my entire career. In the United States Senate, I've passed more major legislation than everybody on this stage combined, from the Violence Against Women Act to making sure we have
the law. But at the end of the day, what we need to do is to bring our people together, not just in opposition to Trump. The initial question, I think, that you wrote, that somebody raised here, was that we are a divided nation. You know what? I kind of reject that. I think when you talk about the pain of working families in this country, majority of the American people want to raise the minimum wage to a living wage. When you talk about the climate crisis, the overwhelming majority of the American people know that it is real. They know we have to take on the fossil fuel industry. They know we have to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. Even on issues like guns, the American people are coming together to end the horrific level of gun violence. So I believe, yeah, we got to deal with Trump, but we also have to have an agenda that brings our people together so that the wealth and income doesn't just go to the people on top, but to all of us.
Vice President Biden, let me ask you to pick up on the issue that Senator Sanders just raised about no one being above the law. When President Ford pardoned President Nixon, he said it was to heal the country. Would you support a potential criminal investigation into President Trump after he leaves office, even if you thought it might further inflame the country's divisions?
Look, I would not direct my Justice Department like this president does. I'd let them make their independent judgment. I would not dictate who should be prosecuted or who should be exonerated. That's not the role of the President of the United States. It's the Attorney General of the United States, not the President's attorney, private attorney. And so I would, whatever was determined by the Attorney General I supported, that I appointed, let them make an independent judgment. If that was the judgment that he violated the law and he should be, in fact, criminally prosecuted, then so be it. But I would not direct it. And I don't think it's a good idea that we model ourselves after Trump and say, lock him up. Look, we have to bring this country together. Let's start talking civilly to people and tweeting. The next president who starts tweeting should, anyway. It's about civility. We have to restore the soul of this country. And that's not who we are. That's not who we've been. That's not who we should be. Follow the law. Let the Justice Department make the judgment as to whether or not someone should be prosecuted, period.
Senator Sanders, let me ask you briefly to respond to that, the difference of your opinion there with Vice President Biden.
Well, no, I think Joe is right. I think that it is the function of the Attorney General. But what I am of the opinion is that the American people now do believe, and the more they see these impeachment hearings on television. They do believe that we have a president who thinks he's above the law. We have a president who is engaged in corruption. We have a president who has obstructed justice. And in my view, somebody who has violated the Emoluments Clause. I think Joe is right. That is the function of an independent Department of Justice. But my inclination is that the American people do believe that this president is in violation of the law.
Can I respond very quickly?
Briefly.
Distinction. Should he be impeached and should he be thrown out of office? That's one question. He's very close to he's indicted himself. Number two, after he's thrown out of office or after he's defeated, should he be then prosecuted? Should he be prosecuted for a criminal offense while he was president? That's a judgment to be made by an attorney general.
Mr. Vice President, thank you. Ashley.